the Crysta and the Hycross selling, Innova as a brand sales have never been higher. I think 1 lakh units in the last year, which is amazing, is the highest ever.
While we talk of generations, we also have to talk of the price hikes across generations and facelifts.
They raised price with just impunity. Innova, a phenomenal success story, and built on what, Sergius? Just the reputation of durability and reliability and the fact that nothing goes wrong with it.
And I think, a lot of it rests on the fundamentals like the platform. We have to talk about the IMV platform, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of defined the Innova.
The Innova actually at launch was almost a flop. This year, the Toyota Innova turns 20, and that's what we're going to talk about in this week's episode of Deep Drive, brought to you by Kotak Mahindra Prime. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
And I'm Sergius Barretto. And yes, it's quite a car to celebrate, right, Hormazd, or an MPV as it were. 20 years.
I mean, it is actually one of the biggest success stories of the auto industry. I mean, the Innova, it's really iconic, legendary. It still keeps going. It's a people mover like nothing else we've seen. And honestly, it is one of, as I said, the biggest success stories that there is.
Yeah, I mean, many cars have done 20 years, but they've maybe survived 20 years. This one has thrived. I mean, it's only gone from strength to strength to strength. Volumes have increased, despite the prices also going through the roof. I mean, from the time it was launched to where it is now. Right?
Absolutely. Very few cars, in their 20-year life cycle, we've seen that the Innova now is selling at its peak. It's over 100,000 units. Of course, you've got the hybrid in there in the mix as well. Yeah. So not the Innova as we remember it, because the Crysta really is part of that generation,
that lineage,
part of that lineage. But again, it's the Innova badge. And, I don't think, I'm just trying to think, maybe the Scorpio is possibly the only other model that after 20 years is still thriving in this same way. Both ladder on frame. So that tells you something there. But I think I think to understand the success of the Innova, it's you have to understand Toyota's philosophy, and even maybe its predecessor, the Qualis.
The Qualis or the Kijang, in fact, which oddly enough was discontinued at the peak of its sales, right? I mean, you don't normally see that. You typically have sales going up. There'll be a small downward.
That's right. So you're right. I mean, I think it got discontinued in 2005, and I think 2004 it did about 36,000 units, which was quite a lot. But we have to rewind to understand Toyota's thinking and what the Qualis did for Toyota and the brand. And frankly, in a way, it almost derailed the Innova because Innova really wasn't a success when it was initially launched.
At launch, yes.
At launch. So I think going a step back with the Qualis, launched in 2000, 2004, 4 years of phenomenal success. And I think it was a real bold move from Toyota. I would even call it a bit of an arrogant move, because what they did is they brought an old generation model. It had sliding windows, boxy design, small 14-inch wheels. It was, almost contemptuous of the Indian consumer that, this is what they deserve. They don't deserve anything better. Right. While Indian OEMs, were giving everything in their cars in terms of features relative at that time, what there was. And even the engine was, I think, just 75 horsepower at that time. Very simple engine. Right. Low stressed, which a lot of Toyota engines are. And I think, but it just proved itself in terms of bulletproof reliability. But I think the customers that attracted, and I think this is the key point, were fundamentally fleet buyers. Right. And 80 to 90% of Qualis sales were of the lower variants, and only the top end variants, I think GS and GST at that time, I think that's what it was, just accounted for 10% of the variants. And I think so clearly it was the darling of the taxi segments, the fleet segment. Superb reliability, superb economy, very low running costs, everything that a commercial operator wants in a car, and they never had it. Don't forget, at that time there was only the Sumo, not very reliable. Exactly. I think Mahindra's, they had the Bolero at that time, which was trying to be positioned more as a personal car. Right. And you had those were the only MUVs that were around. And of course, there was the Tavera, which came in 2003, which is again a big part of the story here. And clearly, I think that was the first serious competition to the Qualis in that sense. And in a way, a better car.
Absolutely, Hormazd. It was, in fact, a lot better a car when you
Yeah.
benchmarked it, and I happened to do that. Right?
Yeah, and it was an Isuzu, which was
Absolutely.
reliable.
Direct injection engine, had a lot of power, quite fuel efficient,
more spacious.
more spacious. I mean, it aced it on every parameter that we could, at that time see in terms of benchmarking. In fact, there's a funny little story here when the Qualis was discontinued and the Innova introduced. GM and who are our clients, they were very happy. They said, like, this is great news for us because, Qualis is gone. They're vacating the space. And the Innova will definitely fail because, they've gone so high in price. So, let's do some campaign. And we had this thing called the Tavera is a laster. It was an acronym for, looks and the turbocharged engine or something. And the whole thought was that this one will last, whereas Qualis is gone and Innova would die. But
and we know what happened.
we know what happened, yeah. It's quite... It's quite strange. But, almost you said reliability. And there's another anecdote there because I remember talking to a fleet operator, the BPO, the call center guys, and who was supplying cabs to a call center. And we were trying to sell him essentially the Tavera. And he said, look, I don't want to move away from Toyota. He said, if I get a contract to supply 100 cars, I have to buy 110 because there's servicing and, things that go wrong or whatever of a Toyota. He said, if I buy a Tata Sumo or any other brand, he said, I'll buy 130.
Right.
Which is to keep...
account for so many off the road.
Yeah.
And
so, that was an eye-opener to us. And we had no answer. Like, he says, that's why I buy this car. He said, forget all your benchmarking of the space and this. So,
and I think the Qualis also was really a darling of, let's say, BPO companies.
Exactly.
Because as a people mover, it was fantastic. And I think about almost 20% of their sales were to BPOs.
Right.
And I think, again, that was a problem when the Innova came. Because I think you had rear access to the rear seats was from the tailgate,
right.
Which was, from what I understand, with BPOs quite important because the hierarchy in sitting also over there.
Okay.
And the third row in an Innova was from the door.
Yeah.
So I think that also was an issue. But I think we have to talk about how the Innova actually at launch was almost a flop. It really didn't pick up the way it wanted. There were a lot of issues. Firstly, let's talk about the pricing.
Right.
I mean, it was about 2 lakhs more than the Qualis?
Yes, if you look at diesel to diesel, the Qualis was diesel only, whereas Innova came in with the petrol.
Correct.
And a diesel. But
we're talking about 9 lakhs.
So if you look at the petrol, it was 6.75. I have it here to about 10 lakhs, 9.95.
Right.
On the diesel. But
top end to top end.
Yeah. So it was
actually even more because what Toyota did very cheekily is in the last year itself, it took about 4 to 5 price hikes, 20,000 each.
Right.
To try and get the price of the Qualis as close to the Innova as possible. So when it
reduce that difference.
Yeah. So I think, frankly, there was a fundamental flaw, and I think Toyota realized that was a big mistake was discontinuing the Qualis. Right. When they could have run them both parallelly. But of course, at that time, you think globally to keep a line running for that time, whatever would have been maybe 25, 30,000 units was just not worth the effort from managing a supply chain point of view, which was also global. So they discontinued it.
Right.
But I think by discontinuing it, it did 2 things. One is it gave the Tavera a fresh lease of life.
Exactly.
To your point.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's really it. The Tavera just swept the Qualis's market and not the Innova really.
Right.
Because I think the Innova, the assumption was again from Toyota that, this will also appeal to the fleet buyers. Right. So when they launched it, they did it in the same mix, which was about 80-90% lower end and the balance at the top end. Right. When actually the demand was the opposite.
The other way.
Because people were seeing it as a bit of a premium car. Right. Then I think other issues, of course, it was very expensive. People were perceiving it to be too big. It really had this concept of being too large. Don't forget, at that time, there were no real MPVs. This was the first MPV. It was very much a sedan market.
Right.
So, it would have pulled people from Honda cities, which was really the benchmark sedan. At that time, it was intended to do that. Similar price, you get a vehicle with more space, but it didn't quite do that because of this. So, and I remember the Toyota guys at that time, the volume projection was 4,000 units, and they were not selling more than 2,500 units per month. But Toyota being Toyota, sales and marketing is on in one orbit and production is in another. So they didn't stop production. They kept on producing at 4,000 units per month.
Okay.
Now, it's very interesting why they do that, because once Toyota is committed to their suppliers, they don't reduce the volumes. I mean, 0 to 3 months, absolutely nothing. Then maybe 3 to 6 months, they'll reduce by 5%. And then after that, maybe just by 10%. And it's just fascinating. It tells you how Toyota thinks that, the supplier is so important. It's again like a customer to them. They don't want to deny them of the volumes they had committed. And of course, in the end, it all has a financial impact. So they kept on churning out these Innovas. I think at one point, there was just this sea of stock lying in every possible nook and cranny of Toyota's Bidadi factory. Some of them were open. Even to some extent, rats had eaten the wiring. There was no covering. It was a real disaster at that time. And really, I think Toyota had to get into panic mode. They got Amir Khan as a brand ambassador. They'd never done that really. They thought, he worked on, Shah Rukh Khan had worked on Santro, so Amir could work on the Innova. And, they were really in a desperate situation with so much stock. I think finally they cut the price by about 1 lakh and a bit, got the stock going, and that kind of kick-started the Innova. And then by then, the product appeal and, word of mouth,
for itself.
That just spoke for itself. And since then, the Innova never looked back.
Yeah, absolutely, Hormazd. It's never looked back. And I think, a lot of it rests on the fundamentals like the platform. We have to talk about the IMV platform, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's kind of defined the Innova. It's such a simple but reliable and robust platform. 3 products only on it. You have the pickup, the MPV, and a SUV. So Fortuner, Hilux, and Innova.
Yeah, and you have the double cab also.
The double cab version, of it. So let's say maybe 4 with the double cab. But I think just amazingly engineered, product and platform, and which is still today selling, and we still have the second generation actually. While if you look at it, we've moved on to the third gen.
So you're right, very, very long life cycles. But I think, you have to understand again Toyota's philosophy, which is just keeping it simple, as simple as possible. Take the engine, 2.5 liters producing only 102 horsepower and about 200 Newton meters of torque from a 2.5 turbo.
Very low stress.
Very low stress. I mean, the whole idea was actually they were appealing to fleet operators, which didn't need the power. They needed the economy and the
reliability.
Yeah. NVH also wasn't great.
Yeah.
It was a gruff, noisy engine. It was a bit low geared. It really didn't give you that, that punchy diesel feel. I mean, it was very tractable, no doubt, which again is what a loaded Innova, because of people load the Innovas, taxi operators would want that absolute grunt and pulling power. But I think at that time you had cars with better NVH. Even some of the Mahindras were quieter. So Indian companies were trying to do everything to make their cars more appealing by targeting these sort of areas. But frankly, it didn't really wash because that Toyota's bulletproof reliability. And it wasn't just simplicity of, the mechanicals. It was the ease of servicing the vehicle as well. Even from a servicing point of view to access things like oil filters or, whatever consumables want to change. Very, very simple. And I think they just went on for miles and miles and miles and, things never went wrong with it. So I think it was this absolute reliability. And, Sergius, another thing also is, if you've noticed now with the Hycross, it's changed because of market pressures. Toyota just never had sunroofs in their car for one very simple reason, that why put in something complex where there's scope for unreliability, leakage and stuff like that. Now we've seen, in certain Mahindras, social media, of course, makes a big thing out of these, leaking sunroofs and stuff like that. So they don't want to be, bothered with that, have that problem. So just don't have the sunroof at all. Of course, now with the Hycross, they've had to change tack because, there's market pressure to have a sunroof. It's one of the most desired features, so they have to have that. But this is their thinking, keep it simple, don't make it complex, because if you do that, the scope of anything going wrong is minimal. And that really was the philosophy of the Innova, and still is.
Absolutely. In fact, the first gen Hormazd ran for if you look at it, it was launched in 2005.
2005 to
2016.
With hardly any facelifts along.
Exactly. They've had facelifts, but they were literally three, I think, but they were literally that minor facelifts.
Correct.
Small tweaks here and there.
Yeah, very minor facelifts, and honestly, very, very long life cycles for the product. In fact, I think the first gen, it was just basically the diesel, which went on for 2005 to 2016, the 2.5 turbo diesel.
There was a petrol also.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about, they had a petrol, but it hardly sold, Sergius. Right. I think not even 5%, or practically just minuscule. Right. From what I understand, it was just on order. Petrol hardly sold, but again, Toyota just wanted it in their portfolio. And at that time, to kind of, homologate engines wasn't as costly as it is today. So people or manufacturers had a wider engine range, and really petrol has not been part of the, traditional Innova kind of demand. And it was only after the Delhi diesel ban that petrol picked up in these markets. It was Delhi, Kerala, that sort of thing. But otherwise, petrol has just not been part of the mix at all. It's been pure diesel, a workhorse.
Absolutely.
And, 2.5 liter, 102 horsepower. If you take BHP per liter, it's terrible. But I think they've kept it because low stress on the engine, and that means phenomenal reliability and efficiency.
Yeah, and absolutely, Hormazd. I think this engine kind of strategy also played out in the second generation, which came after over a decade. We had a petrol and a diesel, but two diesels now.
Two diesels, that's
and
right.
The petrol also saw an increase in capacity from a 2 liter to a 2.7 liter.
That's right.
Actually, I have to ask you, did you happen to drive any of the petrol Innovas? Because I've never driven one.
I drove the 2.7, which is very tired, but, very ordinary engine, I think. Even the first one I did drive very briefly, but very dull and, something that unremarkable, something you forget about. Of course, it would be super reliable. But otherwise, there was really no market for it at all. They were just workhorses, and that meant diesel.
That meant diesel, absolutely. And the second gen, yes, of course, we still have it as the Crysta now, carrying on, thanks to the Innova Hycross, also the third gen coming in.
Yeah, and I think running side by side.
Side by side. And I think it's probably now safe to say that did Toyota learn the lesson about discontinuing an older car? Because the second gen is still around.
Totally. I think, they really learned from that mistake. It was a massive mistake, discontinuing the Qualis, because it just kind of opened the market for, let's say, the Tavera, when there was a solid demand for the Qualis still. And quite clearly, they did realize that, the vehicles were so different. A Qualis and the Innova, they were not just one generation, but two generations apart, because we skipped the in-between Kijang. And it was quite funny. I have to say, the story is that we would have probably made the same mistake. But I remember that time, Overdrive magazine, they saw this Kijang being tested and took a scoop shot, Toyota testing the Kijang. And it was quite logical, because that was the current generation Kijang. Right. But it wasn't. It was actually Mahindra who had bought that vehicle and were testing it, assuming that was the one they were going to launch, when actually it was a Qualis. So none of us expected the Qualis to be launched. I think what Toyota did, so they then jumped a whole generation. We never saw that the second gen Kijang come into the market at all. Skipped, let's say 2 generations ahead. And that's why, coming back to the point that I think both could have sold alongside successfully. And that's what's happening right now. Because, with both the Crysta and the Hycross selling, Innova as a brand, sales have never been higher. I think 1 lakh units in the last year, which is amazing, is the highest ever. I think about just over 60% are the Hycross for sure. Crysta is less. But I think, Crysta still has a market, though they've knocked off one engine and they still just have the 2.4 manual right now.
They have the 2.4, but they also had a 2.8 liter automatic diesel, which
At launch.
which is
that was
amazing, right?
I mean, it had a surplus of power.
Right.
You had the power modes. It was really powerful, really quick, an absolute joy to drive. You can imagine an automatic with so much power and torque. Really was a car that I think really appealed to a lot of the private car buyers because it had all the ingredients: power, convenience of an automatic, and of course, we've not talked about the ride quality of an Innova. Probably still the gold standard for body-on-frame vehicles as far as ride quality goes. Really very stable, very flat, that sense of control you get. So I think the chassis also could take that increase in power. And of course, a lot of Innova, let's say fleet or taxi drivers had a bad reputation for the way they would speed on the highway at that time.
Sure.
But again, it was just kind of, the chassis could just take that kind of power.
Absolutely. In fact, that chassis, if I'm not mistaken, Hormazd, going back apparently the IMV project, so right from the first gen, was the brainchild of Akio Toyoda.
Yeah, it was absolutely. It was his idea.
Right.
I think it just come in at that time taking the thing, and it was just, again, I think the brilliance was in its simplicity and concept. It was the way it worked is that different regions would produce some aggregates for the car for the rest of the world, and that's where let's say a transmission unit in India, which really made parts made transmission for
the global supply.
At that time, things were different. Geopolitics makes things a lot more difficult that time, but at that time, globalization was, I wouldn't say its peak, but it was really quite well embraced by a lot of nations. So I think, you had this kind of ease of, let's say, shipping components from one country to another or to different regions of the world quite easily and cost effectively.
Yeah, and Hormazd, while we talk of generations, we also have to talk of the price hikes across generations and facelifts. I mean, like we were saying, the first car.
Yeah, they raised price with just impunity.
Absolutely. The first car, the petrol, of course, launched at 6.74 lakh.
My God.
Diesel was 7.34 lakh on the base. The top ends was still in the 9 lakh, 9.95, right? Facelifts were there. They took prices up by about 50,000, a lakh and things like that. But when the second generation came in, which is what we know as the Crysta, in 2016, the price was now 20 lakh at the top end at launch. So basically, they doubled the price at the top end. Yeah, in 10 years, 13 to 20 lakh.
Unbelievable.
It is absolutely unbelievable. And of course, that carries on even with the third gen.
What I'd like to add is that, the Crysta actually was also a phenomenal vehicle because, I think I remember that time Toyota engineers were struggling is that the Innova was such a solid template that how can we improve it? And the reason why they've got these long life cycles also is simple philosophy. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
The demand is still there. So that's why they're 10 years minimum. Crysta also still going on. From 2016, though with just one powertrain option. But I think the Crysta, the styling was much better.
Yes.
It looked more modern.
Insides too, I mean, had nice
too.
looks.
So at the time it was good. I think I remember at that time they understood that Indians like to travel long distance. So 7 1-liter bottle holders for all passengers. And again, little tweaks to the suspension. And I think the big jump in the powertrain because they did realize that 2.5, the earlier one was definitely underpowered, and they just went to the other extreme with the 2.8. So I think the pricing, I would imagine, was for the 2.8.
Yes, at the top end. So this would be the 2.8. But
still, double the prices.
Exactly. I mean, even if you look at the 2.4, it was 19.48. So
that's it.
Yeah. So that's all the difference there was. So it was still an expensive vehicle. I think this has been really like a cash cow for Toyota, right?
The Innova has been the cash cow for Toyota TKM, Toyota Kirloskar Motor. I mean, it is the model that has really been the bedrock of the company because don't forget, for a long time, I think until, was it the Camry? Even the Camry really was very low volume, but really until the Corolla came, it was the only model for Toyota, and that time that's all they had. So they really invested a lot in it, made sure it was a success, and more than that, made sure that it was hugely, hugely profitable. And we can see why by these price jumps where no real dip in volume. In fact, it'd be interesting to know how it did in 2016. I think it peaked around 2018 as well. So that's
I think I have that here. It peaked around 2018, 78,000 units.
so
Dropped immediately after that, but that's because of then COVID and things like that. It followed. But it's climbed back up. I mean, as a brand too, right? So
that's right. And I think 2019 we were shifting to BS6. So there's a lot of disruption in the market.
Correct.
Everyone was preparing for BS6, and it was this Supreme Court law that you can't sell. You can, it's not just production. You couldn't even sell. So people had cut back on production well before to clear stock before the March 31st deadline.
Absolutely. And then, the Crysta had a facelift Hormazd after the launch in 2020. And even then, prices were hiked again. I mean, you had the base moving up to 16 lakh and the diesel 2.4 now because they discontinued the 2.8.
Yeah, they didn't want to upgrade the 2.8
correct.
to BS6.
Right. This was 24.33 lakh, so almost 25 lakh. Again, another substantial hike. It's really remarkable. And of course, with the Hycross now, that top end is now looking at 29 lakhs. So
that is crazy.
It's
gone up, over 3 times?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. From 10 to 30 odd lakh, you can say.
10 for the top end, yeah.
For the top end, just look at the top end.
Top end
from the first gen, yeah.
That's insane. I don't know if any car, it'd be interesting to see which cars have gone up by this multiple
across their life cycle.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, of course, the Hycross, I can understand to some extent the price hike because it is almost like a separate philosophy in building it, right? It's a monocoque.
Completely different. I think it's honestly just Innova named.
Right.
Because everything about it is different from the construction, the powertrain.
Right.
It's
petrol only now and hybrid.
That's right. That is diesel only. Yeah. This is petrol and hybrid, monocoque. So really very, very different vehicles. Just the name which is going on as well.
But they had to do that because I think for the future, Hormazd, you can't carry on. There's only so much you can do with a ladder frame, right? I mean, electrification, emissions, so many things.
I don't think it's the ladder frame. I think it is the diesel engine.
The engine.
And frankly, a Crysta will not work with a petrol engine.
Right.
That vehicle is too heavy.
Right.
It won't be efficient at all. And we've seen in the past, Innovas or the traditional ladder-on frame Innovas, petrol, there's just been no volume at all. And we talked about that earlier. So I think this is the hedge. My sense is they may discontinue the Crysta once Cafe 3 kicks in. Because that diesel carries quite a penalty as far as Cafe numbers go. And Cafe 3 is expected to kick in on April 1st, 2027. So I think Innova's got a short run.
The Crysta.
The Crysta has the Crysta has got a short run. Innova Hycross will definitely continue and take things. So, that could be the end of an era of good old ladder and frame MPVs. And really, that's the only one around if you look at it, because what we've not talked about is how it's just everyone has tried and how everyone has failed. Right now, you have the Ertiga. Again, very successful as an MPV, but again, it's not a ladder-on frame. It's a monocoque. But in between, you had so many competitors for the Innova. They all tried to take the Innova on at its own game and failed miserably. I mean, the list just goes on.
Yeah, we got the Marazzo, we had the Aria, Hexa.
The Aria, the Hexa.
Right.
All of them at some point were trying to take them on. Again, ladder on frame didn't work. You had some of the monocoque ones also, like the Logis and all, which at some point did, aim to compete with the Innova.
Logi, Evalia, there were a few more there as well.
That's right. I think now everyone has realized just don't go into that territory. You'll come away with a bloodied nose and it just doesn't work. I mean, even Kia to some extent tried with the Carnival positioning it up. So you never get the same volumes and you'll never get that sort of thing. So really, I think, Innova, a phenomenal success story and built on what, Sergius? Just the reputation of durability and reliability and the fact that nothing goes wrong with it.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I think that, in fact, carries on even with the Hycross, despite it being now a far more complex vehicle, the strong hybrid. It's a series parallel hybrid, one of the most sort of, you can say, complex powertrains today in a car. If we take EV, hybrids, ICE, etc. But again, people are running it in fleets, and whoever I've spoken to, they say it's absolutely fine. Putting in the miles after miles after miles, running smoothly as ever. I think there's no difference in that philosophy in terms of moving over.
Absolutely not. And we should just, before we end, talk about what is that philosophy. And I think that philosophy goes right back from the drawing board of just keeping reliability and longevity in mind right from the drawing board. So take out complexity, however tempting it is. Then it is then taking your philosophy to the suppliers. So Toyota will actually sit with the suppliers. It's not like other things. They just give them the drawings and then they say, make it. Here Toyota works together, goes through a lot of the development gates or markers or milestones with them in the program management, as the program is. I think you speak to any supplier, and the one difference they tell you between dealing with Toyota and other brands is how Toyota work very closely to ensure that the component that they build is up to a certain spec, up to a certain quality, and the way they produce it also has that same philosophy. So I think that's really what they do, and I think that philosophy is carried across, whether it's a series or whether it's a parallel hybrid or just a good old diesel.
Right.
So that's what it is. But I think Innova really embodies Toyota's philosophy probably better than anything this country has seen.
Absolutely. And, Hormazd, so as we end this, also one thing I want to discuss with you is the future of the Innova. Now, we have the Hycross here, which is a hybrid. And then, of course, there's also, Hormazd, the concept they showed, which will make it for sure, I guess, to production, is the flex fuel version with the strong hybrid on the Hycross. So really that kind of also negates the drop in efficiency concern on a strong, on ethanol, because you have the strong hybrid now, electrification sort of filling and compensating. So I think that's also another change and another sort of direction that we can see the Innova going to.
And I think also the hybrids efficiency really is making a difference, because I remember speaking to a taxi operator in Goa.
Okay.
He'd bought the hybrid.
Okay.
And his colleague had bought the regular petrol.
Oh.
And he was really upset with his choice, really totally abusing the car, saying that, I should have got the Hycross because the delta in fuel consumption is huge.
Right.
The regular petrol, just because of its weight, has pretty bad fuel efficiency. And the hybrid is so much better. But of course, there's an upfront cost. He didn't want to pay that, but I think, the amount they run, clearly you can recover that upfront cost with the better efficiency. So I think even taxi operators are now feeling the advantage of the hybrid powertrain. And as you said, as you go with ethanol, that advantage can only get stronger.
What do you see as a full EV Innova? Do you see that happening soon on the Hycross?
Well, I think I think they're already building one on the e-Vitara platform. Toyota will have its own equivalent of a kind of a SUV crossover. And the next model on that platform, joint with Maruti Suzuki, is an MPV.
Okay.
So the first is a SUV, the e-Vitara, then the Toyota
version.
And the next will be an MPV.
That's right.
So that will come out maybe around 27. Around the time, I think the Innova diesel could go away, and whether this replaces it, I don't know, because clearly an EV, whatever you say, it doesn't have the long legs of a diesel. They just can't compete.
Right.
Here you've got a diesel that can, do cross-country miles, has phenomenal range, don't have to worry about fill-up. So, but, honestly, a lot of the commutes are very short.
Yep.
So something like...
especially the taxi operators. Within the city.
Within the city. Tour operators within, around Jaipur, hotel to hotel, taking tourists around. All that market is there. But, doing, let's say, Jaipur, Udaipur, which some people want to do, or Jaipur, Jodhpur, that sort of stuff may not really be that convenient. So unless the range dramatically increases, which I don't see happening in this model. So I think that could be one transition, and who knows, in the future, I think they do see that, filling that gap, or let's say getting out of that space, is something they would be very conscious of, having had that experience with the Qualis. I don't think they'll let that space go so easily. But one thing's for sure, there'll be no ladder frame because that's not the future. So that will go. How that will impact the Innova as a brand, if there's anything for one needs to know, because at the end of the day, what people don't realize is that the ladder frame has a certain appeal in the Indian market. And they all say chassis wala gadi, which means they know it's a ladder frame vehicle. That's really been Mahindra's success right now. If you look at it, the bulk of their sales are on ladder frame, which is, we look at it old tech, but that's appropriate tech still, especially with our road conditions. So, it's going to be interesting to see. But I think once the Crysta goes, that will really be the end of an era.
Absolutely. And this, I think the start of a new sort of, not just chapter, but perhaps a new volume really in the Innova brand name, because we have probably hybrid, monocoque, and maybe electrics.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Innova brand name is going to continue with the Hycross. That's what it is. There's a big future for that. Whether they continue with the Innova brand name in traditional MPV, even the Hycross is one, but it's slightly different. But that remains to be seen. But what's for sure is that the Innova will continue, and it is continuing to see success in the form of the Hycross. Very, very different from the Innova that was launched 20 years ago. But still, an Innova is an Innova, and it's made with certain philosophies in mind, certain Toyota principles in mind, and that's really been the reason of its success. So that's it from us on Deep Drive. Hope you enjoyed this episode and all the other episodes we've been bringing to you every week. So to make sure you don't miss any of them, don't forget to hit the notification button, and you can also get us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for watching.